Welcome back to our channel, your premier destination for the most captivating drama, explosive secrets, and passionate romances from the world of daytime television. Today is a magnificent day to delve deep into the glamorous yet treacherous lives of our favorite Los Angeles families. Grab your favorite beverage, settle into a comfortable spot, and let us unpack the breathtaking, heart-stopping twists that are about to unfold in the grand halls of the Forrester Mansion. The sprawling, opulent estate of the Forrester family has long been the stage for some of the most beautiful celebrations of love, but it has equally served as the battleground for the most devastating betrayals. The walls of this magnificent mansion hold decades of secrets, echoing with the ghosts of past manipulations and shattered vows. Now, a new chapter of dark, calculated deception is being written, orchestrated by none other than R.J. Forrester. Driven by a bruised ego and a dark, insatiable thirst for retribution after his complicated fallout with Electra Forrester, R.J. has transformed from a privileged heir into a cunning architect of emotional destruction. Recognizing that Melissa Dillon was left in a state of profound vulnerability following her own agonizing entanglement with Will Spencer, R.J. saw not a colleague in need of comfort, but a perfectly positioned pawn on his psychological chessboard. He observed her weakened state, her lingering heartache, and the fragile nature of her current standing at Forrester Creations, deciding to strike with a proposition that was as audacious as it was cruel. R.J.'s master plan was a masterclass in manipulation, a desperate and calculated move designed to reclaim the power and pride he felt had been stripped away from him. He approached Melissa Dillon with an offer she felt entirely powerless to refuse: a fake wedding. This was not a proposal born of sudden affection or hidden passion, but a strategic alliance forged in the fires of mutual desperation. R.J.'s primary motivation was a vindictive desire to make Electra Forrester regret ever walking away from him. He wanted to flaunt a sudden, passionate, and ultimate commitment to another woman, hoping the sheer shock of his rapid progression to the altar would shatter Electra's composure and force her to realize the magnitude of what she had lost. He wanted to inflict the same psychological pain he had endured, using the sacred institution of marriage as a weapon of mass emotional destruction. For Melissa Dillon, the proposition presented an agonizing, soul-crushing moral dilemma. She was fully aware of the treacherous nature of R.J.'s scheme, understanding the profound disrespect it showed to the institution of marriage and the legendary Forrester family that had welcomed her into their fold. Yet, buried beneath her guilt and apprehension was a desperate, flickering flame of hope. Dillon harbored deep, unresolved feelings for Will Spencer, and a part of her believed that this extreme, shocking measure might be the only way to awaken Will to his true emotions. She hoped that the sight of her walking down the aisle toward another man would serve as a violent catalyst, tearing away Will's stoic facade and forcing him to fight for the love they shared. It was a toxic blend of coercion and desperate romance, a dangerous gamble that required her to sacrifice her integrity on the altar of a fake relationship. However, Dillon's participation was not entirely voluntary. It was heavily influenced by the unspoken, suffocating power dynamics at play within the walls of Forrester Creations. R.J. did not hesitate to leverage his formidable position as the boss's son, casting a long, threatening shadow over Dillon's hard-earned career. The implicit threat was clear: comply with the charade or face the systematic destruction of her professional life. Trapped between the fear of losing her livelihood and the desperate hope of winning back the man she truly loved, Dillon was pushed into an impossible corner. She agreed to the fake engagement, stepping into a labyrinth of deceit that required her to lie to her colleagues, her friends, and the formidable patriarchs of the Forrester dynasty. The weight of this deception settled heavily upon her shoulders, turning every smile into a strained performance and every public appearance into a grueling test of her endurance. As the preparation for the hastily arranged wedding began, a suffocating, oppressive atmosphere descended upon the Forrester mansion. The usual joy and chaotic excitement that accompanied a genuine celebration of love were entirely absent, replaced by a tense, artificial cheerfulness that felt brittle to the touch. The rushed nature of the event, the suddenness of the engagement, and the lack of a believable romantic foundation between the bride and groom created a pervasive sense of unease among the family members. Every floral arrangement, every perfectly curated menu, and every sparkling decoration seemed to mock the dark reality of the situation. It was a gilded cage of a celebration, a beautiful, opulent lie where every smile exchanged between the supposed happy couple concealed a bitter, unspoken betrayal. No one felt this underlying tension more acutely than Ridge Forrester. The seasoned patriarch possessed a legendary intuition, a keen, discerning eye that had been sharpened by decades of navigating the treacherous waters of his family's dramatic history. Ridge watched the frantic wedding preparations with a growing, inescapable sense of dread and suspicion. He observed the interactions between his son and Melissa Dillon, noting the distinct lack of genuine warmth, the forced laughter, and the subtle, lingering glances that spoke of anxiety rather than adoration. The narrative of their sudden, all-consuming romance simply did not align with the reality Ridge was witnessing. He could sense the manufactured nature of their relationship, the hollow core hidden beneath the glossy veneer of their public declarations. Ridge's suspicions were further fueled by the painful echoes of his own family's history. He could not help but draw chilling parallels between RJ's current behavior and the masterful, often destructive manipulations of his late mother, Stephanie Forrester. Stephanie had been a grand architect of interference, constantly meddling in the romantic lives of her children, orchestrating elaborate schemes to ensure her vision of the family's future was realized. Ridge saw that same dark, controlling energy manifesting in RJ, a desperate need to manipulate the people around him to serve his own emotional agenda. Ridge knew all too well the devastating consequences of such interference, the broken hearts and fractured relationships that inevitably followed in the wake of such deceit. Yet, despite his profound reservations, the runaway train of the wedding preparations proved impossible to stop, hurtling toward a disastrous conclusion. The morning of the ceremony arrived, bringing with it a heavy, suffocating tension that seemed to seep into the very foundations of the grand estate. Inside the lavishly appointed bridal suite, Melissa Dillon stood before a full-length mirror, her reflection a haunting portrait of a woman trapped in a nightmare of her own making. The wedding dress, a masterpiece of heavy silk and intricate lace, felt less like a celebration of her beauty and more like a beautifully tailored suit of armor, a physical manifestation of the prison she had constructed for herself. The delicate veil that was meant to symbolize purity and new beginnings instead felt like a shroud, obscuring the truth and blinding her to the catastrophic consequences of the path she had chosen. Her heart pounded a frantic, terrified rhythm against her ribs as she realized the sheer magnitude of the lie she was about to perpetrate before God and the assembled elite of Los Angeles. Meanwhile, miles away from the opulence of the Forrester estate, Spencer was fighting a losing battle against his own internal turmoil. For weeks, Will had managed to maintain a stoic, composed demeanor, refusing to rise to RJ's relentless, childish provocations. He had prided himself on his rationality, his ability to rise above the petty squabbles and emotional volatility that so often defined the Forrester and Spencer rivalry. But the news of the impending wedding, the reality that Melissa Dillon was about to permanently bind herself to his greatest rival, had systematically chipped away at his carefully constructed defenses. The facade of indifference was cracking, revealing a raw, bleeding heart that could no longer be ignored or rationalized away. As the hour of the ceremony drew near, Will experienced a profound, earth-shattering realization. He recognized that his stubborn pride, his refusal to engage in RJ's games, was about to cost him the woman he truly loved. The contrast between his rational, logical mind and the burning, undeniable passion in his heart created an agonizing conflict that threatened to tear him apart. Images of Dylan flashed through his mind. Her smile, her vulnerability, the moments of genuine connection they had shared before the shadows of manipulation had fallen over them. Driven by a sudden, overwhelming surge of adrenaline and desperate clarity, Will abandoned his pride, racing toward the Forrester mansion with a singular, overriding purpose: to stop the madness before it was too late. Back at the grand estate, the ceremony commenced. The gathering of Los Angeles's elite sat in hushed, tense silence as the majestic music swelled, filling the cavernous hall. RJ stood at the altar, a smug, victorious smirk playing on his lips as he watched his master plan unfold with terrifying precision. He felt a dark, intoxicating surge of power, believing he had successfully outmaneuvered his rivals and secured his revenge. Melissa Dillon walked slowly down the aisle, her steps heavy, her eyes fixed straight ahead, terrified that a single glance at the audience would cause her fragile resolve to shatter completely. The atmosphere was incredibly thick, a suffocating blanket of anticipation and unspoken dread that hung over the beautifully decorated room. The priest took his place, his voice a steady, solemn anchor in the sea of emotional chaos. He began the traditional vows, the ancient words echoing off the grand walls of the mansion, speaking of love, commitment, and truth, concepts that were entirely absent from the unholy alliance standing before him. As the ceremony reached its critical juncture, the priest paused, taking a deep breath before asking the fateful, time-honored question: if anyone can show just cause why this couple cannot lawfully be joined together in matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. For a fleeting, agonizing second, the room was plunged into absolute silence, the tension stretching to its absolute breaking point. Suddenly, the heavy, imposing oak doors of the grand hall burst open with a resounding crash that echoed like a gunshot through the silent room. Will Spencer stood in the threshold, his chest heaving, his eyes blazing with a fierce, unyielding intensity. His explosive, dramatic entrance shattered the suffocating decorum of the event, drawing a collective, shocked gasp from the assembled guests. Will's usual composed, calculated demeanor was completely gone, replaced by a raw, unadulterated passion that commanded the attention of every single person in the room. His gaze immediately locked onto Melissa Dillon, and the sight of her standing there, draped in the white silk of a wedding dress meant for another man, stripped away the last remaining vestiges of his pride and restraint. Without a moment of hesitation, Will strode powerfully down the aisle, his voice ringing out clear and strong, cutting through the artificial beauty of the ceremony. He declared, with absolute, unwavering conviction, that the wedding was a catastrophic mistake, a grand illusion that could not be allowed to continue. Ignoring the furious glares of RJ and the shocked whispers of the guests, Will poured his heart out, delivering a passionate, desperate confession of his true feelings. He declared his profound, enduring love for Melissa Dillon, his words a raw, honest counterpoint to the calculated deceit that had orchestrated the entire event. He laid his soul bare, offering her a genuine, authentic love in stark contrast to the manipulative charade she had been forced to endure. The immediate fallout of Will's explosive interruption sent massive, destructive shockwaves through the grand hall. Ridge Forrester's long-held suspicions were instantly and violently confirmed, his face darkening as the full extent of his son's manipulative scheme was laid bare before the world. The interruption was not merely a romantic grand gesture. It was a physical, aggressive manifestation of the deep, historical rifts between the Spencer and Forrester dynasties. The bitter, generational rivalry, which had simmered just below the surface for years, was suddenly and explosively reignited in a single, breathless moment. The battle lines were drawn once more, the personal vendettas of the younger generation mirroring the epic, destructive clashes of their fathers. Amidst the chaos, the shouting, and the shattered illusions, Electra Forrester stood frozen in the crowd, experiencing a devastating, world-altering epiphany. As she watched the dramatic confrontation unfold, the horrifying truth of her own involvement crashed down upon her with the force of a physical blow. She looked at RJ, seeing past the handsome, privileged exterior to the cold, calculating manipulator beneath. She realized, with a sickening jolt of clarity, that she had never been the prize in his twisted game. She was merely a pawn, the intended audience for this macabre, psychological play. The entire fake wedding, the sudden engagement, the flaunting of his new relationship, it had all been a meticulously crafted weapon designed specifically to inflict pain upon her. Elektra's realization sparked a fiery, uncontrollable rage within her. She had recently escaped the suffocating, manipulative grasp of her Aunt Ivy's scheming, only to discover that the man she had once cared for was utilizing the exact same dark, deceptive tactics. The ultimate betrayal of her trust shattered any remaining illusions she held about RJ's character. Stepping forward from the crowd, her heart hardened and her eyes flashing with righteous fury, Elektra initiated a fiery, explosive confrontation. She laid bare RJ's cruel intentions, exposing his desperate need for power and revenge to the entire room. The clash of egos, the breaking of hearts, and the total destruction of trust transformed the grand wedding into a spectacular, tragic theater of emotional warfare, forever altering